I want to turn to the Supreme Court and your judicial philosophy. I'm going to ask you a question in just a few seconds. I'm sure many people in here would be curious, knowing that there are 9 Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court. Are there any that you admire or that you would hold up as a model? And I would like for you to answer that in 2 seconds. The other one is, are there any recent decisions that you vehemently agree with, and why? You can answer those 2 questions in this one. What kind of people would you want to put on the court, knowing that 4 of the Supreme Court justices were born in the 1930s, and the next president could choose nearly half the Supreme Court in the next term?
Well, the first and the third question are related. If you look at Justice Thomas and Justice Scalia, I wish we had 9 of them sitting instead of only 2. The Hobby Lobby decision, which recently found that, in fact, even those in business are allowed to live out the teachings of their faith and not be compelled by government to violate their conscience, is a decision that I agree with, and of course there's a bunch that I disagree with, but that one is important in terms of understanding that religious liberty is not simply the right to believe anything you want. That's a part of it. But people say, oh, it's a right to believe. It's not just the right to believe everything you want. It is the right to live out your faith. In essence, to never be personally compelled to violate your conscience or the teaching of your faith. That is a critical component of that right. And I want justices, and by the way, an attorney general and a Justice Department that will protect the right of every American to live out the teachings of their faith in every single aspect of their lives.
This Obergefell decision has just sent shockwaves throughout the church and Christian ministries, and is a pattern of some of the decisions that we've had, but it's really the worst in the threat to religious freedom that it represents. In response, some members of Congress have drafted the First Amendment Defense Act to push back against the threats to religious freedom that would include manipulation by the federal government through its regulatory arms. Would you make such an act a priority to do in your first 100 days as president?
Yeah, we're going to absolutely, and anything else that we can do to protect the religious liberties of all Americans. In essence, we're not going to turn the IRS, for example, into an agency that now begins to target people's not-for-profit status because of what they teach or what they believe in. This may sound outside the realm of possibility to a lot of people. I don't believe that it is. You have now reached the point where if you disagree with people, for example, on the definition of marriage, they call you a hater and a bigot. Now, what's the next step? Once you define that as hate speech, you've defined Christianity as hateful, and then you can foresee how that can apply to tax policy and all sorts of things. The other thing I would say is this decision that you just mentioned, though, I always mispronounce the name, but it's the same-sex marriage decision. If you look at Scalia's dissent, I think he perfectly describes what a ridiculous decision it is. They are, in essence, arguing that these justices, these 5 justices that voted in favor of that decision, have discovered a hidden constitutional right that over 2 centuries of jurisprudence somehow missed. But now all of a sudden they found this hidden constitutional right, and it is an example to you of what the left has done to this country. They can't get these things done legislatively, so they either have to do it administratively through executive orders or through the judiciary. And one of the problems we've had in the center-right movement and the conservative movement is we have not been willing to fight as hard for our nominees as they have been willing to fight for their nominees. That will change when I'm president of the United States.